This is the final episode of Gloves Off. We have tried over the past 7 shows to reckon with the new and terrifying threat from America and the threats from everywhere else now that America is no longer our protector. 2 distinct realities have emerged. The first is that the Canadian people have awoken. By every available indicator, the support seems to be both profound and genuine. The boycotts of U.S. travel and products were not government mandated, and they have only grown. And that's according to Lisa MacLeod, former Ontario Conservative cabinet minister.
People are rallying behind each other, and that level of Canadian pride can never be taken away.
And Quebec journalist Francine Pelletier.
It has brought French Quebec and English Canada closer together.
The other reality is that we're almost incredibly ill-prepared. That's according to retired Major General Scott Clancy.
We fight our adversaries somewhere else, and that has allowed continental defense to just wane.
And national security expert Neil Bisson.
The one thing that I've always felt that Canada has lacked, that it needed, is its own foreign intelligence collection apparatus.
The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. That's Canada's reality right now. And it's obvious why. It has come more or less as a complete shock to us that our oldest friend and ally turned on us. We never thought it would come to this, but it has come to this. And because of our specific history, we are radically unprepared. Key elements of the nation state, key national institutions, have been omitted from our development. To start with, we don't have a national security apparatus that can defend us from invasion. We don't possess serious counter-disinformation networks. And I can't believe I have to say this, we don't have a proper secret service. We didn't establish means of self-defense because we didn't need it. Before we belonged to the trade and military networks created after the Second World War, we belonged to the British Empire. We have always felt more comfortable inside systems, inside the rules-based order. And now the rules-based order has blown up. Welcome to Gloves Off, a podcast about the threat to Canada's sovereignty and what we can do about it. I'm Stephen Marche. Our final question in this series, what does the new normal look like? And to help us answer that question, we're going to speak to the world's foremost expert on autocracy, Anne Applebaum, and with a woman who saw it all coming, Margaret Atwood. The most dangerous idea in Canada today is that the madness of the second Trump administration is going to go away. Some hope that the 2026 midterms will end the nonsense. Or at least in 2028, Trump will leave office. If Trump leaves office. All of this hope is terminally naive, but it allows people to convince themselves that everything's going to work out and they don't have to think about it too much, that they don't have to change too much. The truth is that Trump is going to do what he says he's going to do. He has the broad support of large swaths of the American public. Cruelty and stupidity are not bugs of his administration, they are the attraction. And the American system, not just one man, is in breakdown. The nightmare isn't going away, as much as we all might want it to. But inside that nightmare, there are also dreams, new dreams. The old world has passed and a new world is coming to be, and Canada is far from powerless in this new world. We are a different country in a different reality than a year ago. So what does that new reality look like? To find out, I spoke with Anne Applebaum, author of Autocracy, Inc., as well as a staff writer at The Atlantic magazine. She has seen that new reality emerge both in the United States and in Europe. We caught her at her home in Poland in the aftermath of a recent election where the populist candidate turfed out the centrist president. What I'm really curious to know from you as someone who's in a lot of different places, like you're in Poland right now, obviously you're in Washington, you're sort of on the disintermediated front lines of the struggle between democracy and authoritarianism. And I would just like, to give us a sort of portrait of where you think that struggle is right now.
Neither side is winning. Divisions are now very deeply baked into societies. They're very hard to change. The needle can swing either way at any time. And any narrative about, populism has been defeated, which you heard after the Canadian election, the Australian election, and the Romanian election, or any narrative about how populism is coming back, which now you're going to hear following the Polish election. These are really all wrong. And these are all very close elections. Actually, maybe the Canadian election wasn't so close, but most of them are very close. And they can still flip the other direction.
Tell me about how you see the position in America. Obviously, for us, whether America is authoritarian or democratic is a matter of maybe the primary question of our national security. Is it a battleground there, or do you really see a sort of consistent slide towards authoritarianism? I mean, because that's certainly one reading of the past 10 years. Is America even a battleground anymore, or is it just, a democracy backsliding?
No, of course, America is still a battleground, and it's also a democracy backsliding. And also, I would distinguish between what people want America to be and what it is. I mean, so it's pretty clear to me that the Trump administration are going to try to change the system of governance in America in ways that favor them and their political camp. That doesn't mean they have destroyed the U.S. political system, or that there will never be another different kind of government in the United States, or that the courts won't resist, or that Congress won't eventually resist, or there won't be midterm elections. So none of that has happened yet.
You say neither side is winning. Can you just tell me, how you see the new normal then?
I'm afraid that for some time into the near future, the new normal looks like a battle for the nature of our societies. That we aren't going to, and this is one of my big concerns, is we will neglect a lot of things that we should be doing, whether that's building infrastructure for the long term, whether it's climate change, whether it's worrying about our long-term demographic problems, whether it's finding some way to sensibly regulate AI so that it helps humanity rather than destroying it. I mean, all those kind of very long-term difficult political issues, I am worried will be pushed aside while we watch this struggle for power play itself out. And in the meantime, other societies will be able to move forward without us. And the democratic world could very well lose its dominance, its economic dominance. I mean, it's already, I think, undercut certainly the prestige of the United States, but also the prestige of the Democratic camp, the Democratic Alliance, which the core of which was America, Canada, Europe, and the Asian democracies. And already we look much weaker in the world, and we look much less internally aligned, because we aren't internally aligned. And that gives us less to say, and that gives autocracies and other kinds of societies, more room to try out their own experiments.
I guess there's two questions. One is, what do people who believe in democracy do? And the other one is, what advice do you have for Canadians?
Unfortunately, I think what all this means is that if you care about the nature of your country and you care what kind of political system you live in, you might have to be much more involved in either in politics or in public life than you used to be, or you think you have time for. However you can be engaged, please be engaged, because it now matters in a way that it didn't feel like it did a little while ago. I mean, for Canadians, first of all, know that a lot of Americans are rooting for you, and the vast majority of Americans don't want Canada to be the 51st state. So it's going to be really important for Canadians to be engaged in their own politics, and to think about how to define for themselves what you mean by Canadian identity, how you work on it and build it, how you teach it to children, how you strengthen it, not merely in opposition to the United States or to Donald Trump, but for its own sake.
A lot of the countries we're talking to here to learn from, like Finland, Ukraine, Estonia, they obviously have very strong ethnic identities, right, that are integral to their politics. We don't have that. Right, we're inherently a multicultural society, and so those challenges. I mean, at the same time, clearly this threat has revealed a Canadian identity that is ferocious, right? And that I think took everyone, certainly including me, completely by surprise. Right, that there would be this depth of patriotism in Canada.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I saw a clip of it was a Canadian I think it was a rock concert, but at some point, whoever was performing began to sing the Canadian national anthem, and the crowd kind of stood up and started singing the Canadian national anthem and sort of raised their lighters or their cell phones. I guess that we don't use lighters anymore. And I have to tell you, I thought, oh my gosh, this looks like Serbia, or Georgia. I mean, it looks like it was like an East European,
Wow.
national, patriotic moment. I mean, it was really, it was not something I'd ever seen in Canadians doing before.
While I've been doing this podcast, I've been talking to a sort of a large number of military people in the military political space, they're not a group that I tend to talk to. And strictly from that, just from a few conversations, it seems to me that the theory of war at the current moment is just in real chaos. People don't know how to connect cyber war to other kinds of war. And I wonder, from as someone who is sort of more on the ground with these things, do you think that this, particularly the uncertainty of war at this moment, like what it is, how does that affect the authoritarian democratic divide and this like back and forth over it? I mean, how do you see this conflict playing out in real terms? What are the actual battlefields here?
I'd say there are three. There is a real war, and that's playing itself out right now in Ukraine. And that really is a war between an autocratic state that seeks to dominate and destroy its neighbors and a democracy that's trying to defend itself. And that war has become the most high-tech war that we've ever seen. It's a drone war on a scale that it was unimaginable even a couple of years ago. And it really represents, an extraordinarily innovative, patriotic tech community working on behalf of the nation, in the case of Ukraine, against, the country that has far more people and far more bullets. And what exactly the lessons from that will be, I don't think we really know yet. But certainly the way in which any kind of real war will be fought is changing before our eyes. There's also, though, a narrative war that is going on that that is being fought inside all of our countries. And it is often about identity. What kind of a nation are we? And how do we deal with modernity? And, do we treat the massive amount of, cultural and demographic and social and economic and informational change that we've had in the last 2 decades as a reason to kind of hunker down and move backwards and be nostalgic for the time when there was only one authority and one kind of hierarchy and return to that, or do we find some way to embrace it and deal with plurality and move on? And, different countries are making different choices right now. But the Russians and to some extent the Chinese, the Iranians and others have been working for many years on building an authoritarian narrative about how autocracies are stable and safe, and democracies are divided and weak and degenerate, by which they sometimes mean sexually degenerate. And people who want to be safe need to be in an autocratic system, or a more autocratic system, or led by an autocratic leader. And that's been in a time of great fluctuation and change, that's been very successful. And so people who want to avoid living in an autocratic state or be led by, an autocratic leader need to find a way to make the counter argument better. And so that's I would say the second narrative war. And that's also going on inside the US, I'm sure inside Canada, inside Poland, inside the UK, inside Germany. Mm-hmm. And there's a third war, which is much more harder to see. And I'm not even sure I understand the outlines of it right now. And this is a war about the shape of finance and the economy, and this new economy that now exists alongside the real one, where everybody has either anonymous crypto wallets, or they run their money through shell companies, or they keep their money offshore and they move their money around the world in anonymous and undetected ways. I mean, will we go on living in a world where, there's transparency about what our economy is and how it works, where there are rules about corruption that our leaders have to abide by, or will the power of anonymous money and anonymous finance, maybe hooked to the power of the new billionaires, overwhelm that? I mean, that's another thing that's happening inside the United States right now, right? Trump is not just corrupt, but is corrupt on a scale we've never seen or imagined before in American history. Setting up a cryptocurrency company that people can effectively pay into as a way to bribe him. And there seems to be no possibility of regulating that or stopping it. And that alone already makes him far more similar to the leaders of Central Asia, or the post-Soviet world,
right,
or the, autocratic leaders of Africa than it does to any previous president of the United States. And finding a way to keep our money and our finances and our economy transparent and therefore democratic is also going to be a struggle for all democracies. And that's why actually you're maybe in luck that you have a former central banker running your country who maybe understands some of that.
So there is a war between authoritarians and democrats across the world. It's a struggle that stretches from Korea and Taiwan to Mariupol in eastern Ukraine. One front in that struggle is the Canadian border with the United States. That gives Canada, for all the wrong reasons, a newfound prominence. The task before Canada is daunting and painful. It requires a national reset. The reset will have costs, but it will also have opportunities. I believe that ordinary Canadians understand the situation. They know pain is coming one way or another. They also know that any pain is worth putting up with to remain free, to remain a democracy, to remain us. What I worry about after all the interviews in this series, after listening to the experts, is whether the elites understand what ordinary Canadians do. Bureaucracies are naturally slow, and they have vested interests in refusing to see the drastic change. And Canadian bureaucracies have been focused relentlessly on integrating with the United States for decades. Can they bring themselves to recognize that this is a time for radical change, for big turns? The good news is that there has never been such a moment of explicit nationalism in my life. And it's exciting and terrifying and completely unprecedented. Or maybe not completely unprecedented. The last time there was this much national spirit was the 1960s, a period of cultural revolution that redefined Canadian identity. And its greatest voice was Margaret Atwood, the contemporary Cassandra. Thank you so much for coming. This is terrific. I mean, let's just start with the most obvious question. Like, what do you think of the current situation? Like, what do you think of the 51st state rhetoric? And, how much trouble do you think we're in as a country?
I think moderate trouble. This is a movie we've seen before, but quite a long time ago. So at the time of the American Revolution, there were attempts to invade Quebec, feeling that Quebec ought to join the U.S. because surely they were against the British who had just overcome them. But in fact, the Quebecers of those times didn't want to do that because they knew they'd lose their language. And they were Catholic, and the U.S. making the proposition was quite firmly Protestant, if not deist.
Right.
So they turned them down. They made a botched attempt to actually invade Quebec. I don't think they were ready for the Winter Carnival.
Yeah. You think we're in that level of trouble, though?
Are they going to invade us?
Yeah.
I think it would be very silly, but they're doing some pretty silly things. Right. No, I don't think they're going to invade us right at this very minute. But they are going to mess up our economy because they're messing up everybody else's. However, the big thing at issue in the free trade debate under Mulroney was we will become too dependent on the United States. We will sell out, and then we will be under their control, and we will have no recourse.
Obviously in The Handmaid's Tale, but also I think in a lot of the sort of dystopian American fiction that followed it, Canada's kind of a haven. Right, like Canada's like,
yeah.
And what else is that? The other haven is the future, right? And
sure, yeah.
And I wonder if you still think that Canada and the future are a haven, or if we're going to get caught up in this catastrophe.
We do not know, but there's lots of historical precedent. So during the American Revolutionary War and right after it, it was a haven. During the Civil War, a haven right before the Civil War, it was the land of Canaan. That's where you could escape to if you were an enslaved person. And people used to get smuggled into Canada quite frequently during those times. During the First World War, there was kind of a mixed assortment. So some Americans came to Canada because they wanted to be in the war, and they could join up through Canada. And then others later came because they didn't want to be in the American part of the war. And, of course, most recently, the draft dodgers. There was a huge influx of them. So this has been going on for a while, and you're hearing people again saying, I'm going to move to Canada. But their choice is always, do I stay or fight, or do I flee and have a somewhat more peaceful life?
I guess, in the original sort of burst of nationalism, like I've never really experienced a moment of nationalism.
No, you haven't, because you're too young.
I was too young. Like my first political memory is the free trade debates, right? I guess I would have been 8. But then, so I've never really experienced nationalism on the level that it currently exists. And I wonder if, you were obviously there, and the draft dodgers were part of it too, right? The sense of American breakup leading to Canadian renewed.
Yeah, I wasn't too involved with them. I was somewhat a generation earlier. So I was born in 1939.
Right.
2 months after World War II started. So I'm a war baby. Anybody born after 1950 is a boomer, because the war thing really went on for several years after the war ended. And one of the reasons for that was that Canada put so much money into the war and to Britain that there was a capital gap. And things were a lot skinnier here than they were, for instance, in the States right after the war. And that's when the influx of American capital began. It came in to fill the gap. So Britain didn't have any money anymore. And the trade that had existed before that had been transatlantic.
So that's interesting. So like the Canadian nationalism was kind of a reaction to the first time the Americans had such economic clout over us then.
I wouldn't say it was the first time, but it was a big time.
But
if you go back to World War I, there was a lot of pro-Canadian stuff at that time because the Canadians were doing very well in that war. So after Vimy Ridge, they never lost a battle. And they were so well known for it that they were used in trench coat ads.
Really?
Yes.
How should we not waste this moment? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, how you shall not waste it.
Yeah.
Number one, hating all Americans is stupid. So it can translate into that at a very low level, and that's just silly because half of them would agree with you.
Right.
Not with the people who voted for you-know-who. And even a bunch of them are now having buyer's regret. So you can dislike the administration without saying all Americans are horrible. So that is lesson number one. And there was some of that in the 1968 iteration of that kind of nationalism. But back then it was cultural nationalism.
I mean, the thing that I find interesting is, we're in this build Canada moment, right? Like that's what we elected Carney to do.
Yeah,
apparently.
But it's more build houses for Canada.
At the same time, though, you guys did build those institutions, right? Like it is possible to do, right? Like it is actually possible not to go to New York, to stay here and build things and have them become real and have them become...
Yeah, it's absolutely possible to do that, but any institution goes through a cycle. And it's the... fire in their eyes founders who are willing to work for nothing and, 24 hours a day and sweat equity and all of that, which is what we did. And then there are the inheritors who then have actual jobs.
Theoretically, that's
with
me,
the outfit.
But, not in practice.
Somebody pays the money.
Right.
It's sort of novel.
Right.
And that would be the second generation. And then the third generation takes it all for granted. And then things can start to slip.
Right.
Like things have always been this way, they always will be this way, and when they stop being this way, we all have a horrible panic. But if you started from zero, you're not too panicked about that.
I think, one of the things we've been doing this show, and there's certain patterns emerge in various things, economic fields, military fields, CSIS fields, things like, secret security fields. And there's two things that come up. One is we have an intense desire to survive. There is an the will is very strong,
yes,
and everyone can feel it.
We don't want to be them.
We don't want to be them, and that's across the board. There's a high degree of solidarity. And on the other hand, just a fundamental naivete and a sort of, like, we don't have a secret service that goes into other countries, right? We don't have...
You think we don't?
Well, but, I thought about your work when I heard that because, on the one hand, there's survival as the motif of Canadian life, which fits perfectly with this moment. And on the other hand, I always think about that line you had, I think it was at some parliamentary committee, where you said the beaver, that medieval legend about how the beaver bites off its own testicles.
That was rude of me.
And presents it to the opponent.
Yeah.
Right? And this seems to be some kind of very intense contradiction, which I think actually you can see in a bunch of characters in your work, where you have like very strong and tough, but also kind of naive. Or not naive necessarily, but upright, right?
Well, we think that because we behave in a certain way, that other people will also behave in that way, and that is naive.
Do you think that prepares us for this moment, or do you think it doesn't?
Well, nothing ever prepares you for moments like this.
Right.
You think you're prepared for them, but you're actually not. So moments of crisis and extreme change, you can be somewhat more prepared and somewhat less prepared, but you're never thoroughly prepared because so much of it is unpredictable.
Right.
As you have just seen in the latest election that we have had here.
I think a lot of Canadians are wondering, is it Donald Trump driving the bus off the cliff, or is it the American people driving the bus off the cliff? Obviously you've made some of the most important predictions about the future of America. Do you know what, like Gilead and others?
It hasn't come to that yet. You'll notice nobody's running around in real life in red outfits with bonnets.
No, well, they are at the protests.
Yes,
and
they are.
You can't go to a protest without seeing half a dozen. Well, I mean, obviously it resonates, with the bombing of IVF clinics and, the abortion banning in Texas. I wonder, I guess there's two ways to ask this question. One is, how would you change your predictions of the past? Or if you were starting a whole new book about where America was going and where Canada was going, what would it look like?
Woo. So the future, if I were going to write a book about what's happening next, what would I put into it? Woo. What everybody is going to have to deal with is things that are joined at the hip. Electricity supply.
I didn't see that coming, but okay.
Yeah, well, if you're going to have all this automation and AI and things, you're going to need an awful lot of servers.
Right.
And what is going to power them? So there's that problem. And then, of course, there's going to be some Luddites who want to blow up the servers. I take you back to Henry Ford, who realized that he couldn't automate his factories, which he had the ability to do, because if he did that, there wouldn't be any workers, and there wouldn't be people to buy his cars.
Right.
So
that seems to be where we're going, right?
Yeah, but then what? So in your deepest, darkest, most horrible imagination, you would have to think, America has decided it doesn't need all these poor people. It doesn't need cheap labor, or it doesn't need that much cheap labor. So what are they going to do? They're going to cut health services. They're going to cut Social Security. And a lot of those people are going to die.
Right.
And that's a pretty conscious decision.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't sound like a futuristic novel. That sounds like a realistic novel about 2025.
Well, if you look at what they're doing, you think, okay, Robert Kennedy is involved in some very twisted social Darwinist experiment.
Yeah.
So let's take our grandkids swimming in a toxic swamp because they've got healthy immune systems and they will resist it. And people who don't have healthy immune systems, well, too bad for them. They're not the fit.
Wow, that's even darker than I thought you were going to go. So you see it as like some kind of...
It's just speculation.
Like, yeah, no,
Is it conscious thinking? I don't know. Yeah. But that will be the result.
What's the working title for that?
Genocide of the poor.
Wow.
Well, the things that have been happening in Texas and Florida with pregnant women are just sick.
Yeah.
These are people who claim to love babies and mommy's giving birth, etc., and they'll let you die in a parking lot if something is going wrong with your birth process.
So what do you think Canada should do to protect ourselves from this madness?
It's not necessarily coming here.
Right.
So what protects us from that kind of thing is us. So you don't put in laws like those in Florida and Texas without electing people who believe those kinds of things.
Right.
And I don't think we're anywhere near doing that.
Right. We are different, right? Like the last political memory other than the 95 and 82 with the Quebec referendums, but like referenda, the one I remember is the free trade, which went to Mulroney. And then after that, we've been basically getting more American, we've constantly, consistently.
Both more and less.
Right.
Because if we had not been getting less, you wouldn't have had this big outburst.
So yeah, there's a distinction between Canada and the United States that everyone feels, but also can't articulate. And how do we get to the point where we articulate? I mean, do you think this time, like last time it was cultural nationalism?
Oh, I think we've articulated it quite well.
Right. In the 60s, yeah.
And now too.
Yeah. Right. But this is another moment where we have to really rethink the whole project.
We have to rethink the whole project.
But there's a reset. We look back from this on 10 years and we realize that it's been great for Canada. What does that look like?
If it has been great for Canada.
Hope.
I'm always optimistic.
Really?
You have to be optimistic to be a writer. You know that.
Yeah.
Am I going to finish this? Is it going to be any good?
Will anyone buy it?
Am I going to be able to sell it?
Yeah. Don't remind me.
Will anybody read it?
Yeah.
Will I get horrible reviews?
You still have those anxieties, eh?
They're not anxieties. They're just givens. They're givens that go with the job.
Like 50 mammoth blockbusters doesn't help. Your face on a stamp doesn't help with these little crises.
These are not crises or anxieties. They're just laying it out on the table,
right,
for what it is. Nobody wants to be dissed and taken for granted like that. And everybody can also see that if you're going to be the 51st state, you're going to have all the same problems that they have, which we happen not to have to such an extent.
Right.
We don't need a new Canadian cultural nationalism. It built the institutions that we have now. So I don't think it's a question of building other institutions. I think it's a question of rejuvenating the ones we have and regaining some kind of faith in them.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And I'm so grateful that you showed up in my house.
Yeah, I'm grateful I made it to your house.
Do you want an Uber back?
No.
I guess it's close
I'm joking.
Yeah.
I'm not as decrepit as all that yet.
Canada, from its founding, has come to exist against the United States. That is the basic fact of our country. Northrop Frye, the great literary critic, once said that a Canadian is an American who rejects the revolution. That is who we are, who we will always be. Confederation was a reaction to the American Civil War. The 1960s were a cultural revolution motivated by an optimistic sense of emerging national identity, but they were also shaped by American breakdown. And now we are in another moment of national self-definition. 2020's Canadian nationalism is much darker and more practical than the 1960s version. We have to stand on our own feet or get swallowed up. For Canada, the second Trump administration has been a bit like a teenager being kicked out of the house by an abusive father. We have to grow up fast and we can't go back. And the choices we make now will matter forever. They will shape our destiny. They will reveal our national character. And Canadian character is not set. I don't think anybody can say what it is. There is a strange diversity to our unity and a strange unity in our diversity. Canada is the only country in the world where the more patriotic a person is, the more likely they are to believe in multiculturalism. That's a superpower. It really is. We cannot take it for granted. There are ethnic and regional divisions in this country. But I really believe that Canadian nationalists want French to survive in North America, and that Canadian nationalists believe Indigenous people have the right to self-determination. These are not necessarily virtuous positions. It's that this country can't work any other way. Canada is polyphonic. It doesn't have a language. It doesn't have an ethnicity. It can only find itself within a plurality. The spirit of compromise necessary to build such a country and the facts of our history make other options impossible. Canada embodies neither the open individualism of the United States nor the collectivism of European or Asian societies. It is an attempt to arrive at a precarious balance, a stretched country. The railroad was an almost perfect metaphor for it, nodes along a network spread across a vast landscape. And that's what the world is becoming, even if it doesn't want to. The new normal is a world riven between authoritarians and democracies, and the role that Canada will have to play is itself. We can show that multiculturalism works, that it remains possible to have an open society that does not consume itself, in which divisions between liberals and conservatives are real and brutal, but do not fester into violence and loathing. The contradiction at the heart of our country is becoming glaring. The defiant compromisers, the nationalist internationalists. But in that contradiction is an opportunity to create a unique global position. The proud multiculturalists, the American Europeans, the world's connector, Canada as a bridge. To do that, we will have to stop telling ourselves that we don't really matter. We have to overcome the self-deprecation, the who do you think you are spirit that allowed the compromise and internationalism to flourish in the first place. I have believed for most of my life that Canada has hated ambition, and it has. Quiet decency is more our style. Everybody should be treated the same. Nobody's special. And that's great. It really is. But it's limiting. And we simply cannot survive those self-imposed limits anymore. Canada must dream big and overcome its fear of its own self-importance for the simplest reason there is. We have to. There's a lot to do. Some of what needs to be done can only be achieved by government. We do not have a meaningful foreign intelligence group. We do not have a meaningful strategy to fend off the prospect of an American invasion. We need both. But there are also things that ordinary Canadians can do. Canadian businesses will have to turn to other countries, look for other connections in the world other than the United States. When you read news, check the facts. Develop what we have here first. You can pray that America comes to its senses and that everything goes back to normal, but don't pray too much. It isn't worth your faith. Learn from the Ukrainians. Be wary of threats. The stretched country will remain ours, but the time has come to build it. The time has come to find out who we really are. This is Gloves Off, a podcast about how Canada can survive the American threat and what we can do about it. We hope you've enjoyed this series, if enjoy is the right word. If the issues we discussed in the past 8 episodes resonated for you, rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Stephen Marche. Thank you for listening.
The old relationship we had with the United States is over. Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves.
The true north is indeed strong and free.
Oh, Canada, 51st state. 51st state.
Drops the gloves. Free.
People of Canada like it.
Maybe our greatest state. Drops the gloves. Free.
And we have a fight. 51st state, my fucking ass. Go on, Canada.